It's the new year, and I was looking back at some of the art that I made throughout 2023, and I thought I might share some of these composition studies that I painted from movie stills. I painted these in Procreate on my iPad and had a lot of fun doing it. Here's an iconic shot from Jurassic Park. Maybe one day I'll try to paint the T-Rex itself, but I really love the simplicity and the boldness of this shot, and especially the lighting, the way it plays off of the plastic cups, the ripples in the water, and casts onto the surface. And there's a lot of color that you can find, these yellows, reds, and the subtle purples and greens on the surface of the water. It makes for a really beautiful and effective shot with some really interesting lighting. Here's another shot with really amazing lighting. This one comes from Silence of the Lambs. I love how even though this is just an insert shot of spools of thread, it just has such beautiful color and lighting and is really fun to look at, which is why I wanted to try painting it. And while painting this, I learned a lot about reflected light and the effect that light and shadow has on color. I think that, as you'll see, I got a little carried away with shading each spool as I went, and so my end composition didn't really match the reference because I ran out of room and probably should have blocked in all of the big shapes of the spools first, but I still had fun with this and think that it looks really great, so I'm happy with it, but it's a good reminder to get your composition locked down before you start jumping into the details. This is a shot from Moonlight, and I really love the striking color palette and how the surfaces of the hallway and doors just kind of compress into these large rectangular blocks and strips of color. This was honestly probably harder for them to light and shoot than it is to paint because of how they managed to get all of these surfaces to reflect different colored light. You'll see that I also sketched this out before blocking in the color, which was really helpful since this one had figure drawing, which was a lot more complex for me to try to block out. I wish I got the likeness of the figure to look a little bit more like Naomi Harris, but other than that, I'm very pleased with how this came out, and again, it's just such a beautiful shot with amazing color and lighting. This one is from Mad Max Fury Road. You'll see I skipped the outlines and went back to just blocking in big masses of color. I think that was a very good exercise because, as I said before, sometimes I get a little lost in the details, and keeping it loose and just looking for the big shapes was very helpful in this one. Here's another one from Mad Max Fury Road. I feel like this is the first one where I felt like I was hitting my stride and had some idea of what I was doing instead of completely fumbling my way through it. This one is great because of the way the warm and cool colors work, and it makes it a lot clearer, all of the different planes of his face, and finding all of these colors where the reds turn into these sort of muted greens and then into a blue was very interesting, and there's all these very cool shapes of light and shadow on him. Since it's a much closer portrait and I've had a little more practice at this point, I think I did a better job capturing both the likeness and the expression of the actor. I did have a little bit of trouble with the nose. There's some dirt on his nose, and when I was trying to render it, it just looked like more shadows, which kind of gave the effect of his nose looking bent or broken or something. I think I was able to keep good separation between the foreground and background by using looser brushwork and keeping the values from being too dark or too bright in the background, which gave it this sort of hazy out of focus effect. This shot is from Into the Spider-Verse, and I think this is probably my favorite painting out of all of these. I spent almost 9 hours on this, which I did not need to do, but I had fun the entire time, so it's fine. I didn't do it all at once. There's maybe 3 or 4 different sessions. I just love this shot, and I love this movie. It's so colorful. There's so much energy. The way the big shapes of the drums and the symbols and the negative spaces and all the crisscrossing lines fit together and play off of each other. It's so chaotic, but it's just so organized at the same time. You can see that just the initial block-in already gets the composition most of the way there, which just shows you how strong the framing and the color and lighting in this shot is, but there was still so much to explore in all of the detail, from the shadow shapes to the highlights and all of the colors. The background was a lot of fun to paint too, and very interesting to try to match to the reference to see where they used the different colors in the background and how that played off of the colors and the lighting in the foreground. And of course, at the end, I had to find a halftone brush to give it an authentic Spider-Verse graphical style, and I was able to call it done. This shot is from The Exorcist. and it's certainly not the most iconic or visually striking shot from the movie, but I really love it. I think it's a great example of visual storytelling. You've got all of these leading lines from the perspective that draw your eye to the middle, and the expression of the figure just conveys so much about her emotional state at this point in the movie. I also think the color and lighting works really well in this shot. Even though it feels very muted, you've got a lot of color contrast between the soft pink curtains and the sort of green-gray of the walls and the blue and warm earth tones. It gives it this very eerie liminal space kind of vibe, especially the way I painted it in a kind of chunky impressionist style. Even though I was just trying to be quick, I think it actually works really well with the sort of unsettling feeling of the shot. And the last one for this video is this shot from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. This was so much fun to paint, and it's probably my best one out of the bunch. At the very least, I think the final painting matches the reference the best. The character design and posing is so good and just creates all of these big, chunky, dynamic shapes that I love. For example, I love how the cloak wrapped around the wolf just is this big mass of black fabric that contrasts with the super bright, super vibrant surrounding behind them. And the action line with him staring down Puss in Boots, it's so intimidating and imposing, and it just draws you in so much. And like I said with some of the other paintings, there's so many surprise colors if you look for them. For example, the scythes and the sword actually have a lot of green in them, which I wasn't expecting, and it adds so much to the composition.